Hey everybody, so today we're going to talk about how to apply for tax exempt status for your nonprofit. Let's get into it. Hey, I am Tiffany. I created Boss on a Budget to help small and new nonprofits get up and running. So today I wanted to talk to you about how to become a tax exempt organization. So if you want more videos like this, please remember to subscribe to my channel. I drop a video every week and I talk about tips and strategies to become a stronger nonprofit. So if you subscribe to my channel already, you would have seen a video that I created called What is a 501c3 Organization? So in that, I broke down what it means to be tax exempt, but I didn't necessarily go through the how-to of how to do it. So I wanted to do that and break it down in this video. Now, if you saw that video, and if you didn't, I'm not mad, it's okay, you still have time to go see it. But if you did see that video, you would have heard me talk about the differences between being a nonprofit and being tax exempt. So just because you're a nonprofit organization does not mean you're automatically tax exempt. That only really applies to churches, but you are trying to be a nonprofit organization. So if you want to have federal tax exempt status, you have to do a separate process of going to the IRS. So the first thing you do is incorporate as a business in the state that you're operating in. Once you take care of that, then you go to the IRS and you become tax exempt. So you see how it's levels to this? It's two different processes. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing I wanted to talk about is what you need to do to prepare to apply for your tax exempt status. There are some things you need to understand, and there are some things you just need to have handy before you start going through that process. Now, if you wait to the end of this video, I'm going to break down the two different forms you can use to apply for tax exempt status. Those are the only two forms you will use. I'm going to break down the differences between the two to kind of help guide you through that. But before we do that, let's talk about what you need to know to understand the application process. So first things first, you're going to have certain documents on hand. The number one document you need to have is what we call an organizing document or an articles of incorporation, or maybe it's called a certificate of incorporation. It's whatever document that the state gave to you to confirm that you are officially a business operating in their state. So in some states, they have a form you just fill out. You put in the name of your organization, you put in the name of maybe the resident agent, and then your mission or your purpose, and then they send something back to you and say, congrats, you're a business. In other states, they may ask you to submit something in writing and they just give you a certificate. So just know that it depends. And so you really need to check with your Secretary of State to figure out what the process is in your state. And it is going to be different wherever you go. The other thing that's important to know is that in your articles of incorporation, you're going to have to make sure you put in there your exempt purpose. The IRS needs to have confirmation that when you created your business or your nonprofit, that you were made for exempt purposes. The other piece of that is if you dissolve as a nonprofit, the IRS wants to know that your assets and whatever you own is going to go to another nonprofit. So they like to see a dissolution statement, and I'm also going to link that below. Just keep in mind that every state is not going to automatically have that on their forms. So if they supply a form to you and they say, well, you can just fill this form out and this can qualify as your articles or your organizing document, they may not have those statements in that document. So you need to do your due diligence and make sure that's written clearly in your articles of incorporation. So if you ever have to submit to the IRS, that's clearly stated on your articles of incorporation. If you need help figuring out what your state does or what the processes are in your state, a really good resource is your nonprofit association. So more than likely, they're going to have a guide on their website or some kind of documentation to help guide you through the incorporation process. They're just a good resource generally. So I just encourage you to find out where the nonprofit association is in your area. And a lot of times this stuff is free. You don't have to be a member to get these guides and get these instructions. And it's important to do that in your state because every state is different and there are different laws that govern how nonprofits operate. So you need to really check the laws in your particular state. The other important document you need to have on hand is your bylaws. So they are the operating rules of your organization. So it's going to dictate how many board members you have, board limits, the officers, the committees, all of that. So your bylaws are important to have as a reference, and you may have to submit that as well with your application. It depends on which application that you're using. But it's important to have your bylaws in place because your state's going to require that more than likely anyway. And I always tell people when you're creating your bylaws, yeah, it's easy to Google and figure out, oh, this is a sample bylaw from such and such organization, but make sure you're Googling from the organization that's in the state you're operating in. State law governs how boards should operate. State laws dictate what should be in your bylaws. So what California requires is going to be different from what Missouri requires. So pay a lot of attention to that and make sure that you're looking at bylaws for an organization from the state that you're operating in. The third thing you're going to have to understand is, are you a public charity or are you operating as a private foundation? Now, if you don't tell the IRS that you're operating like a public charity, then they're going to automatically designate you as a private foundation, which if you're going to be a traditional nonprofit providing services in the community and you're going to do traditional fundraising and getting grants, you're not typically going to be a private foundation. So what is the difference? So most nonprofits are designated as public charities. That means that they get their support from a variety of places. That means you get a broad range of support. It could be government grants, it could be other types of grants, contracts, it could be money you earn from services you provide that align with your mission, it could be individual donations. That means not one person can dictate how the funding is dispersed because funding is coming from everywhere. So you're designated as a public charity and you're doing activities in the community. Private foundations are different in that they usually have one source or a limited amount of sources of where they're getting their money. So that means that those sources can really dictate and control the purse strings of how money is used. So public charities and private foundations have different requirements for how they submit their tax forms at the end of the year, and they're just different rules and expectations for them. So you need to make sure that when you set up and you apply, you know you want to be a public charity and you fill out the documentation the right way. So there are two things or two places on the application that are going to ask or test whether or not you're a public charity. One is going to ask whether or not you get your support from a government agency. So, or you get a lot of government support. So if that's the plan, then you would pick that. Another one's going to say, well, maybe you're not getting it from a government agency or a public agency. Maybe you're getting it from earned income or contributions that are related to your mission. Okay, so that's another place where you can designate that you're a public charity. If not, if those don't apply to you or if you don't select those, you're going to be designated as a private foundation. So make sure you pay attention to that. And you may be saying to yourself, well, Tiffany, I don't necessarily know where my money's going to come from. I have a business on the side that I am planning to use that to fund my organization. So does that really mean I'm a private foundation? Well, no. What I will say is if you say that you're a public charity, for the first 5 years of your operation, the IRS is not necessarily going to check that. They're not going to require or see if you actually are operating like a public charity. After 5 years, you're going to have to start proving where you're getting your money from. So the plan is within 5 years, you would have built up a donor base, you would have gotten comfortable with writing grants, you would have kind of expanded the scope of where you're getting money from. So the idea is that eventually you're going to have a broad range of public support, just not right now. So if that's the plan, then it's okay for you to designate right now you're a public charity and then not worry about being a private foundation. Hey y'all, just wanted to stop here for a second to explain a little bit more about what I mean by the 5 years. So in the 6th year of your tax exempt status, the IRS is going to begin applying the public support test. So what that means is they're going to look at your 990 form that you submit and they're going to see where your revenue sources are, right? So they're going to want to see that there's a diverse pool of sources that are providing you funding for your organization. The public support test is just basically at least a third of your revenue, so 33%, has to come from either a public source or money you earn from your exempt purposes. So examples of that could be a government grant, it could be money you earn from membership fees or product sales or service income or individual donors. But if individual donors give more than 2% of your overall budget, they will not count as public support. So you can only include individual donors who give a small amount, which is 2% of your overall budget. So again, why is this important? It's important because the IRS wants to make sure that you are actually a public charity, that not one or two donors have a lot of sway on how money is spent in your organization. So they want to make sure that there's a diverse pool, and they use this public support test when looking at your tax forms to check that. If you actually go under that percentage, so if you have less than 33% from public sources or your program revenue, then they're going to convert you to a private foundation. So it's really important that you pay attention to that so you don't kind of go into a status that you're not prepared for. Okay, let's go back to the video. Okay, so now that you know what you need to do and how to prepare to apply for tax exempt status, let's talk about the different ways you can apply. There are only two ways you can get your tax exempt status, and that's through two forms, either the 1023-EZ or the regular 1023, which sometimes I call the long form. The 1023-EZ is relatively new within the last, 6-7 years, and it's an application process that the IRS created to help smaller nonprofits get up and running, because the regular 1023 is just a bear. It's just a lot of work, and you have to supply a lot of information, and some of the information on there is confusing. So they created a streamlined application to make it easier for smaller organizations to kind of be able to compete and not be kind of shafted or ignored. So they have the opportunity and the access to become tax exempt as well. So the 1023-EZ is really, really easy. You just have to supply the name of your organization, your purpose and your mission, your board members, and then you have to answer some questions about how you plan to operate. Just like I talked about with, are you a public charity or a private foundation? Those are the things. Now, not everyone is going to apply or be eligible to fill out the 1023-EZ. So if you are a nonprofit and you've been in existence for a while and you've made more than $50,000 each year over the past 3 years, you're not eligible. If you're a nonprofit and within the next 3 years you plan to make more than $50,000 each year, you can't apply for the EZ form. If you have assets more than $250,000, you can't apply for EZ. So do you see the theme? It's if you're a smaller organization, you're just getting up and running, the EZ form is for you. But if you're more established and you have a larger budget and you're a larger organization, then it's not really going to apply to you, and you're going to have to fill out the 1023, the long form. The EZ form is $275 as of this recording. It may change, and you just use the form online, go through pay.gov, fill out the form, and generally you get an answer within a month or two. But that may shift based on what's happening out there in society. So if there's a pandemic or there's something going on like a strike or furloughs, that may be different. But generally within 1 or 2 months, you get a response with the EZ form. Now with the long form, that thing is a bear. So you're going to have all of your organizing documents, your bylaws, a list of your board members. You're going to have your budget for the next 3 years. You're going to have to report money from the previous 3 years. You're going to have to report things in the way you would fill out your regular tax form. So what's your programming dollars versus your admin dollars versus your fundraising dollars? So what the long form does is prepare you as an organization for what's coming down the pike. So the IRS is interested in learning and knowing how you operate And again, checking to make sure that you're still operating as an exempt organization. So they're going to want to see where your money is going. They're going to want to see where your money is coming from. So it's a very detailed form that you're going to have to fill out to prove to the IRS that you're an exempt organization. Now that form, just recently as of this recording, is now available online. You can also apply at pay.gov. It's $600 as of this recording to apply. And as I said, there are a bunch of different things and documentation and possibly board minutes, your bylaws, your articles of incorporation, your budget, a bunch of different schedules that you're going to have to fill out, detailed activities or descriptions of your programming and what you do. All of that's going to be required. It's going to take a long time. So just take your time and make sure you fill out everything completely. Now, what I will say is that nonprofit law and requirements can be very complicated. So I would suggest that if you're trying to do this yourself, you at least get the advice of an attorney or an accountant to help you figure out how to answer the questions the right way. So you're not kind of all out there by yourself, because if you answer one question the wrong way, it can completely derail your application. So just take your time and submit it and go through the process. And if you do the long form, it will prepare you for what's expected coming down the road. All right, y'all. Thank you for hanging in there with me. So now you know how to apply for tax exempt status. If you're interested in creating your own nonprofit, I have a checklist that kind of guides you through the steps from A to Z about how to become a nonprofit, even more than just tax exempt status. I also have a workbook where if you're the kind of person where it's like, I just need you to tell me what to do and what to write, I have a workbook also that you can purchase that will help guide you through that checklist. And as always, if you have questions for me, visit me at www.bossonabudget.com, and I will see you next time.